The man vomiting blood onto the mud isn't a soldier. He's a farmer. His name is Elric. He's 34 years old, and 3 days ago he was harvesting barley on his farm in Kent. Now he's on a hill in Sussex with a spear in his hands, watching a wall of Norman cavalry thunder toward him, and he knows with absolute certainty that he's going to die today. This is the Battle of Hastings, October 14th, 1066. And I'm going to tell you what it was really like. Not the clean, heroic version you learned in school. The real version. The version where men's intestines spill out when they're cut open. Where horses trample wounded soldiers into unrecognizable pulp. Where the screaming doesn't stop for 9 hours. Where the smell of shit and blood and vomit is so overwhelming that men retch even as they're fighting for their lives. Welcome to Ash and Crown History, where we explore the past without sugarcoating or glorification. Today, we're diving into one of the most brutal battles in English history. And I promise you, everything you think you know about Hastings is wrong. Subscribe now because this story is about to get dark. Let's start with the biggest myth. The arrow in Harold's eye. You've seen the image. The Bayeux Tapestry shows a figure labeled Harold, with an arrow protruding from his face. For 900 years, this has been the iconic image of the Battle of Hastings. King Harold, struck down by a lucky arrow, dying instantly, the English army collapsing in despair. It's a compelling story. It's also bullshit. Harold Godwinson didn't die quickly. He didn't die cleanly. And the arrow didn't kill him. What actually happened was so much worse. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go back to the morning of October 14th, 1066. And meet the man who's about to lose everything. Harold Godwinson wakes up in his tent on Caldbeck Hill at 4 a.m. He hasn't slept. For the third night in a row, he's had the same nightmare. Standing in a shield wall, surrounded by the bodies of his housecarls, an arrow punching through his face. Harold is a practical man. He's been a warrior since he was 16. He's fought the Welsh, the Irish, Vikings, rebel English nobles. He's survived shipwrecks, political intrigues, and more battles than he can count. He doesn't believe in prophetic dreams. But this one feels different. He gets dressed in silence. Leather undergarments first, then a heavy chain mail hauberk that weighs 30 pounds. It takes 2 servants to help him put it on, lifting it over his head and settling it onto his shoulders. Over that, a cloth surcoat with his personal emblem, the fighting man. His sword is Frankish made, the best steel in Europe, a gift from King Edward 20 years ago. His helmet is simple, an iron cone with a nose guard, no fancy decorations. Harold is 44 years old. He's been King of England for exactly 9 months. 9 months ago, King Edward the Confessor died without an heir. On his deathbed, Edward supposedly named Harold as his successor. The Witan, the Council of English Nobles, confirmed it. Harold was crowned King of England on January 6, 1066. But there's a problem. Actually, there are 3 problems. Problem 1. Harold Hardrada, King of Norway, claims the English throne through a complicated genealogical argument that basically amounts to, my ancestor knew your ancestor. Problem 2. Harold's own brother, Tostig, has been exiled from England and wants revenge. Problem 3. William, Duke of Normandy, claims that King Edward promised him the throne years ago. And William also claims that Harold himself swore an oath on holy relics to support William's claim. Harold denies this. He says William tricked him, that he was shipwrecked in Normandy and forced to swear the oath under duress. Whether Harold is telling the truth doesn't really matter anymore, because William has convinced the Pope that Harold is an oathbreaker and a usurper. The Pope has given William a consecrated banner and declared that anyone who fights for William will receive absolution for their sins. William's invasion of England is now a holy crusade. So Harold isn't just fighting a foreign invasion. He's fighting God's judgment. Or at least that's what William's army believes. Harold walks out of his tent into the pre-dawn darkness. His housecarls, his personal bodyguards, the elite warriors who've served him for decades, are already awake, checking their weapons and armor. These men are the core of Harold's army. There are about 2,000 of them, all professional soldiers, all sworn to die for their king. And many of them will keep that oath before the day is done. Harold's brother Gyrth approaches him. Gyrth is 35 years old, Earl of East Anglia, and one of Harold's most trusted commanders. The scouts report the Normans are moving. Gyrth says quietly, "They'll be here by mid-morning." Harold nods. He knew this was coming. William landed on the south coast 2 weeks ago and has been systematically burning Harold's own estates, killing his people, destroying his property. It's a deliberate provocation designed to force Harold into a hasty battle. It's working. 3 weeks ago, Harold was 250 miles north at Stamford Bridge, where he destroyed an entire Viking army led by Harold Hardrada and Tostig. Harold won that battle, but it cost him. He lost 2,000 men, a third of his army. The survivors are exhausted, many still wounded. And now Harold has marched them 250 miles back south in just 12 days to face another army of equal size. Gyrth looks at his brother with concern. "We should wait. The northern lords are marching south. The London garrison is mobilizing. If we wait 2 more days, we'll have 12,000 men instead of 7,000. Harold shakes his head. "William is burning our people. Every day we wait, more villages burn, more people die. We end this today." "Brother." Today, Gyrth. This decision, this refusal to wait for reinforcements, is the mistake that will cost Harold his kingdom and his life. But Harold doesn't know that yet. All he knows is that his lands are burning and his pride won't let him wait. By 6 a.m., Harold's army is assembled on Senlac Hill, about 7 miles northwest of Hastings. The position is good, a long ridge with slopes on 3 sides, forcing any attacker to come uphill. Harold positions his 7,000 men in a formation that English armies have used for generations. The shield wall. The shield wall is beautifully simple and devastatingly effective. Soldiers stand shoulder to shoulder in ranks 8 to 10 men deep. Each man holds a large, round shield made of wood and leather, painted with his personal colors. The shields overlap, creating a continuous barrier. Behind the shields, the housecarls hold their weapons. 2-handed Danish axes that can split a man from shoulder to hip in a single stroke. In the center of the shield wall, Harold plants his royal banner, the fighting man's standard and the dragon of Wessex. This is where Harold will make his stand. At 9 a.m., the Norman army appears at the base of Senlac Hill. Harold watches them deploy. He's fought enough battles to read an enemy army's composition at a glance. The Norman center is infantry, about 3,000 men with swords, spears, and shields. These are solid troops, but nothing Harold's housecarls can't handle. The Norman left wing is Breton troops, mercenaries from Brittany. They're brave fighters but undisciplined. They'll break if pushed hard enough. The Norman right wing is a mix of French and Flemish soldiers. They're fighting for pay and plunder. They won't die for William if the battle turns against them. But it's the cavalry that worries Harold. William has about 2,000 mounted knights, the largest cavalry force ever assembled in Western Europe. On flat ground, they'd be unstoppable. But on this hill, with the English shield wall anchored on high ground, the cavalry's advantage is negated. Harold allows himself a moment of confidence. He's in a strong defensive position. His men are better trained. He's never lost a battle. If the Normans want to take this hill, they're going to have to climb over a wall of English corpses to do it. He doesn't realize that William is thinking exactly the same thing in reverse. At the base of the hill, William the Conqueror sits on his horse, studying the English position. He's 38 years old, but he looks older. Years of warfare have left him scarred and hard. He's missing 2 teeth from a mace blow to the face at the Battle of Varaville. His left hand is slightly withered from a childhood wound that never healed properly. William is a bastard, literally. His father was Duke Robert of Normandy. His mother was Herleva, the daughter of a tanner. When William was 7 years old, his father died and William inherited the duchy. Immediately, Norman nobles tried to kill him and seize power. William survived 3 assassination attempts before he turned 12. He won his first battle at 19. He's been fighting for his life ever since. Now William is looking at the English shield wall and calculating. He has 7,000 men, the same as Harold. But William's army is rested. Harold's men just marched 250 miles. William has cavalry. Harold doesn't. William has crossbowmen with armor-piercing bolts. Harold has archers with hunting bows. But Harold has the high ground and a near-impregnable defensive position. This is going to be a long day. William turns to his commanders, Bishop Odo, William Fitzosborne, Robert of Mortain, and Count Eustace of Boulogne. The English won't come down from that hill, William says. They're going to make us come to them. And they're going to kill a lot of us doing it. But they're tired. They're outnumbered in cavalry. And their king is too proud to retreat. We're going to break them. It's just going to cost us. He pauses. Archers forward. At 9:30 a.m., the battle begins with a sound like rain on a thatched roof. 1,000 Norman archers releasing their arrows simultaneously. The arrows arc through the morning sky and fall on the English shield wall. Most bounce off shields harmlessly. A few find gaps. Elric, the farmer from Kent who we met at the beginning, is standing in the 3rd rank of the shield wall when an arrow punches through the neck of the man in front of him. The man makes a wet gurgling sound and falls backward. Elric and another soldier catch him and lower him to the ground. Blood is pumping from the wound in rhythm with the dying man's heartbeat. His eyes are wide, panicked. He tries to speak, but only blood comes out. He's dead in 90 seconds. Another man immediately steps forward to fill the gap in the shield wall. This is how the shield wall works. It's not about individual heroism. It's about being part of a living machine. When one man falls, another steps forward. The wall must hold. The Norman archers loose again. And again. They fire arrows for 20 minutes straight, thousands of arrows falling like deadly rain. The English hunker behind their shields and endure. When the arrow barrage finally stops, maybe 100 English soldiers are dead or wounded. Out of 7,000. Harold was right. The high ground makes the archers nearly useless. The arrows lose momentum as they arc upward, and most hit shields at a shallow angle and bounce off. William's archers have failed. Time for the infantry. At 10 a.m., 3,000 Norman foot soldiers begin marching up Senlac Hill. They're moving slowly, trying to conserve energy for the uphill climb. Each step is an effort. They're wearing 30 pounds of chain mail and carrying shields, swords, and spears. The grass is wet with morning dew, making the slope slippery. The English watch them come in complete silence. The only sound is the clink of armor and the breathing of 7,000 men waiting for the storm to break. When the Normans are 50 yards away, Harold gives the order, "Javelins!" The front rank of English soldiers hurls hundreds of javelins down the slope. The effect is catastrophic. Javelins punch through shields, through armor, through flesh. Men fall screaming. The Norman line wavers but doesn't break. They keep coming. 30 yards, 20 yards, 10 yards, and then they hit the shield wall. The impact sounds like a tree being struck by lightning. Shields crash into shields. The Norman line recoils from the shock. They push forward again. The English push back. This is where medieval combat becomes truly nightmarish. In the crush of the shield wall, there's no room to swing a sword properly. Men fight at arm's length, stabbing over and under shields. A Norman soldier drives his sword up under an English shield, aiming for the groin. The blade punches through leather and flesh. The Englishman screams and collapses. 3 more men immediately step forward to fill the gap, trampling the dying man underfoot. A housecarl in the front rank swings his two-handed axe. It comes down on a Norman soldier's helmet with a sound like a bell being struck. The helmet caves in. The man's skull shatters like an egg. Brain matter and blood spray across the men around him. The corpse doesn't fall, there's no room to fall. It stays upright, held in place by the press of bodies, until someone pulls it backward and lets it drop. The Normans are fighting uphill, shoving against men who have better leverage and better armor. They're exhausted from the climb. Their initial momentum is gone. For 45 minutes they push against the shield wall. For 45 minutes they die by the dozens. Finally, the Norman infantry breaks. They turn and flee back down the hill, leaving hundreds of dead and wounded behind. The English roar in triumph. Some of the younger soldiers, militiamen from the FYRD who've never been in a real battle before, can't resist. They break ranks and chase the fleeing Normans down the hill. Elric is one of them. He's seen the Normans run, and suddenly the fear that's been crushing his chest for hours turns into rage. He wants to kill these invaders. He wants to make them pay for every village they've burned. He runs down the slope, screaming, his spear raised. And then the Norman cavalry hits him. The first thing Elric sees is the horse. It's massive, a destrier, a war horse bred for size and aggression. The horse alone weighs 1,400 pounds. On top of it sits a Norman knight in full armor, lance lowered. Elric tries to set his spear to receive the charge, but he's on uneven ground, running downhill out of formation. The lance catches him in the chest. The impact lifts him off his feet and drives him backward. The lance punches through his leather armor, through his sternum, through his lung, and out his back. Elric is dead before he hits the ground. Around him, 200 other English soldiers who broke ranks are being slaughtered. Norman cavalry ride them down, trampling them, spearing them, hacking them down from horseback. The screaming is terrible, but Harold's core shield wall on the hill didn't break ranks. The housecarls held firm. The battle has been going for an hour. The Normans have lost 400 men. The English have lost 300. This is going to take a while. For the next 3 hours, the battle follows the same pattern. Norman infantry charges up the hill. They hit the shield wall. They take casualties. They retreat. Norman cavalry tries to exploit gaps in the English line. The housecarls with their long axes cut down both horses and riders. Norman archers fire thousands of arrows and accomplish almost nothing. By 1 p.m., both armies are exhausted. The slope of Senlac Hill is covered with bodies. The grass is slick with blood. The wounded are crying for water, for their mothers, for someone to kill them and end their pain. The Normans have lost 1,500 men. The English have lost maybe 500. William is losing. His army is faltering. The Breton mercenaries on the left are close to mutiny. They've suffered heavy casualties and gained no ground. Some of William's knights are suggesting retreat. If William pulls back now, his invasion is over. He'll have to return to Normandy in disgrace. He'll lose his reputation. His enemies will smell weakness and attack. He might even lose Normandy itself. He's out of options. So he tries something desperate. William orders a feigned retreat, one of the most difficult tactical maneuvers in medieval warfare. Here's how it works. The Norman infantry will attack the English shield wall again. But after a few minutes of fighting, they'll deliberately break and run away in apparent panic. The English, seeing the Normans flee, will, hopefully, break ranks to chase them. And when the English soldiers are spread out and disorganized, the Norman cavalry, which has been hiding in reserve, will turn around and destroy them. It's a tactic that requires perfect timing, perfect discipline, and a lot of luck. If the Norman infantry runs too convincingly, the cavalry might think it's a real retreat and flee too. If the English don't take the bait, the Normans have just wasted more men and energy. But William is desperate. At 2 p.m., the Norman infantry charges up the hill one more time. They hit the shield wall, fight for about 5 minutes with no real commitment, and then suddenly break and flee down the hill in apparent terror. The English see the Normans running and can't believe their luck. The enemy is breaking. They're winning. Harold screams at his men to hold the line. His housecarls obey, they're too disciplined to break ranks. But the FYRD, the militia troops, the farmers and craftsmen who were called up 2 weeks ago and have no real military training, they see the Normans running and think the battle is won. Hundreds of them break ranks and chase the fleeing Normans down the hill, eager to finish them off. They run right into the trap. The Norman cavalry wheels around and charges into the scattered English soldiers. It's not a battle. It's a slaughter. Knights with 12-foot lances punch through men from behind. Swords hack down running men. Horses trample soldiers into the mud. The sound is obscene. Men screaming, begging for mercy, calling for God as they're cut down. A young man named Oswald, a carpenter from London who'd been conscripted into the FYRD 3 weeks ago, takes a lance through his back. The point emerges from his stomach in a spray of blood. He looks down at the foot of steel protruding from his own abdomen, unable to process what he's seeing. The knight wrenches the lance free and Oswald's intestines spill out. He tries to hold them in with his hands as he falls to his knees. He's screaming, but he doesn't know he's screaming. He dies in the mud, alone, 400 miles from home. Within 15 minutes, 600 English soldiers are dead. Harold's army started the day with 7,000 men. He's now down to about 5,800. The Normans have about 5,500. For the first time, the English don't have a numerical advantage. The battle continues. It's now 2:30 p.m. Men have been fighting and dying for 5 hours straight. Both armies are physically and mentally exhausted. Soldiers are suffering from dehydration. It's surprisingly warm for October, and men in 30 pounds of chain mail sweat buckets. The dead are piling up. The front ranks of the shield wall are literally standing on corpses now. Some of the bodies are English, some Norman, some so mutilated it's impossible to tell. The smell is overwhelming. Blood has a sharp, metallic smell. Opened intestines smell like shit because they contain partially digested food. Men who die in terror often void their bowels. Vomit is everywhere. Some men throw up from fear, others from the stench, others from the sheer horror of what they're witnessing. This is what medieval warfare actually smelled like. This is the part the movies never show you. Harold is still in the center of the shield wall, still fighting. He's 44 years old and he's been in combat for 5 hours straight. His shield is gone, it was smashed to pieces an hour ago. He's using a shield he pulled off a dead soldier. His sword arm is exhausted, but he keeps fighting because if he stops, if he shows weakness for even a moment, his men will break. To his left, his brother Gwrth is dead. A Norman arrow caught him in the throat an hour ago. His body is somewhere in the pile of corpses, but Harold hasn't had time to look for it. To his right, his brother Leofwine is still fighting, but he's wounded. An arrow is sticking out of his shoulder and blood is running down his arm. Harold's housecarls are dying. These men have served him for decades. He knows their names, their families, their stories. And he's watching them die one by one. But the shield wall is still holding. At 3 p.m., William makes another desperate decision. He's thrown his infantry at the shield wall multiple times and they've been repulsed. His cavalry can't charge effectively uphill. His archers can't hit the English behind their shields. So William tells his archers to change their tactics. Instead of firing arrows directly at the shield wall, he orders them to fire high, to lob arrows up in an arc so they fall from above onto the English formation. It's a simple change, but it's devastating. Shields protect from the front, not from above. Helmets protect the top of the head, but arrows falling from above can hit shoulders, necks, the gap between helmet and collar. At 3:30 p.m., the Norman archers fire their first high-angle volley. The arrows rise into the sky in a dark cloud and then fall like rain onto the English shield wall. Harold is watching the Norman lines when someone shouts a warning. He looks up. He sees hundreds of arrows falling toward him. He raises his shield above his head. An arrow punches through the shield and hits Harold in the face. Now, here's what we know from multiple sources. The arrow struck Harold somewhere in the face or head region. Some sources say it hit his eye. Others say it hit near his eye. Others say it hit his forehead. The arrow did not kill Harold instantly. Think about that. You've just been shot in the face with an arrow. The arrow has punched through your helmet or your face or your eye socket. You're in excruciating pain. You're bleeding profusely. You might be blind in one eye, and you keep fighting. Harold tears the arrow out of his face. A decision that causes even more damage as the barbed arrowhead rips through flesh on the way out. Blood streams down his face. He can't see out of his left eye. Whether because it's been destroyed or just because it's full of blood, we don't know. But Harold doesn't fall. He doesn't retreat. He stands in the shield wall, bleeding from his face, and keeps fighting. His housecarls see their king wounded. Some of them waver. But Harold is still standing, still giving orders, and the shield wall holds. For 30 more minutes, Harold fights with an arrow wound in his face. But the English line has seen their king fall. Even though Harold got back up, the sight of him wounded has broken something in their morale. Men are scared. The shield wall is still holding, but barely. William sees this. He knows this is his chance. At 4 p.m., William orders one final, desperate assault. Every remaining Norman soldier, infantry, cavalry, everyone, charges up the hill in one massive wave. The exhausted English shield wall holds for maybe 20 minutes. And then it breaks. Not all at once. A gap opens in the left flank where Gwrth's troops had been. Norman cavalry pours through. Then another gap opens on the right. More cavalry. The shield wall collapses like a dam breaking. English soldiers turn and run, but there's nowhere to run to. They're on top of a hill surrounded by Norman cavalry. The Normans ride them down from behind. Lances punch through backs and out through chests. Swords hack down fleeing men. It's a massacre. But Harold and his housecarls don't run. They form a tight circle around their wounded king. There are maybe 200 of them left out of the original 2,000. The Normans surround them. For the next 30 minutes, Harold's housecarls fight the most heroic and most futile last stand in English history. These men know they're going to die. They know the battle is lost. But they're housecarls. They swore an oath to protect their king, and they will keep that oath until their last breath. A housecarl named Godric, a 52-year-old veteran who's been fighting since before Harold was born, swings his two-handed axe in massive arcs, keeping the Normans back. An arrow hits him in the chest. He pulls it out and keeps fighting. Another arrow hits him in the stomach. He staggers but doesn't fall. A third arrow hits him in the neck and he finally goes down, still gripping his axe, his last act being to pull a Norman soldier down with him. Another housecarl named Leofric takes a sword thrust through his thigh. The blade cuts through muscle and shatters his femur. He screams and falls to one knee. A Norman knight moves in for the kill, but Leofric swings his axe from his kneeling position and catches the knight in the groin, cutting up through the chain mail and into the knight's body. Both men die within seconds of each other. The circle gets smaller. 200 men. Then 150. Then 100. Harold is still in the center, still fighting. His face is a mask of blood. He's using a sword in his right hand and a short axe in his left. He's killing any Norman who gets close, but his movements are slower now. He's lost too much blood. His vision is failing. And then 4 Norman knights break through the circle. What happens next is so dishonorable that William the Conqueror later punished the knights involved. They don't give Harold a warrior's death in single combat. They gang up on him and butcher him. Knight 1 drives a lance through Harold's chest, punching through his chain mail and into his heart. Knight 2 swings a sword at Harold's head. The blow doesn't quite decapitate him, but it cuts deep into his neck, nearly severing his head. Knight 3, while Harold is falling, still alive but dying, cuts off Harold's leg below the knee. Knight 4 does something so obscene that medieval chroniclers, who describe disembowelments and beheadings in clinical detail, refuse to write it down explicitly. Modern historians believe he castrated Harold's corpse. Harold Godwinson, the last Anglo-Saxon king of England, dies on Senlac Hill at approximately 5 p.m. on October 14, 1066. The last of his housecarls die within the next 10 minutes, fighting over their king's mutilated body. The Battle of Hastings is over. 7,000 men are dead or dying. Another 3,000 are wounded. The slope of Senlac Hill is carpeted with corpses so thick in places that you can't see the grass. The evening air is filled with the moaning of the wounded, crying for water, for help, for someone to end their suffering. The Normans walk through the carnage, finishing off the wounded English and stripping the dead of armor and valuables. It's standard practice in medieval warfare. Dead men don't need gold or weapons. Some English soldiers are still alive, trapped under piles of dead bodies. Some suffocate. Others slowly bleed to death over the course of hours. A few manage to crawl away under cover of darkness. William surveys the battlefield and knows he's won. But he's also aware of what this victory cost him. He's lost 2,000 men, nearly a third of his army. The survivors are exhausted and traumatized. But he's won. And now comes the part that shows you what kind of man William really is. The day after the battle, Harold's mother, Jitha Thorkelsdottir, comes to William's camp. She's 73 years old. She's just lost 3 sons in one day, Harold, Gwyrth, and Leofwine. She kneels before William and makes him an offer. Harold's weight in gold in exchange for her son's body, so she can bury him properly. Harold was a large man. He probably weighed about 200 pounds. In 1066, that amount of gold would be worth a fortune, enough to pay an entire army for months. William refuses. He tells Jitha that Harold was an oath-breaker and a traitor, and traitors don't deserve Christian burial. William orders Harold's body to be stripped naked and thrown on a pile of garbage on the beach at Hastings. He puts a knight named William Mallet in charge of guarding the corpse to make sure no one steals it for burial. For a week, the last Anglo-Saxon king of England lies on a garbage heap, his mutilated corpse rotting in the sun, pecked at by seagulls, scavenged by dogs. Finally, William allows the body to be buried, not out of mercy, but because the rotting corpse is becoming a health hazard. Harold is buried in an unmarked grave somewhere on the coast. To this day, we don't know where Harold Godwinson is buried. Some legends say monks from Waltham Abbey eventually retrieved the body and reburied it there. In 1954, Archaeologists excavating at Waltham Abbey found a skeleton showing signs of the wounds described in medieval accounts. Trauma to the skull, a severed leg, signs of mutilation. But the evidence is disputed. We may never know where England's last Anglo-Saxon king rests. The aftermath of Hastings was catastrophic for England. William marched on London, but he didn't attack the city directly. Instead, he devastated the countryside around it. His army burned villages, destroyed crops, killed livestock, and murdered anyone they found. The message was clear: submit or starve. On December 25, 1066, William was crowned King of England in Westminster Abbey. But the English people didn't give up. For the next 5 years, rebellions broke out across the country. And William's response was genocide. In 1069, the north of England rebelled. The uprising was led by Edgar the Atheling, the last surviving member of the Anglo-Saxon royal family, supported by northern lords who refused to accept Norman rule. William's response is known to history as the Harrying of the North. William's army swept through Northumbria and Yorkshire, systematically destroying everything. They burned every village, every farm, every church. They killed every person they could find. Men, women, children, elderly, it didn't matter. They slaughtered all livestock. They salted the fields so nothing could grow. The goal wasn't just to defeat the rebellion. It was to make the land itself uninhabitable. Contemporary chroniclers, who were used to the brutality of medieval warfare, were shocked by the scale of the destruction. Orderic Vitalis, a Norman monk who generally praised William, wrote that the harrying was so terrible that he dare not commend it. The death toll was catastrophic. Modern historians estimate that 100,000 people died, most of them from the famine that followed when there was nothing left to eat. 20 years later, when William's officials compiled the Domesday Book, a comprehensive survey of England, vast stretches of Yorkshire and Northumbria were still recorded as waste, uninhabited, unfarmed, destroyed. The trauma was so deep that the population of northern England didn't recover to pre-1069 levels until the 14th century. 300 years. In total, William's conquest killed somewhere between 150,000 to 200,000 people, 5 to 10 of England's entire population. For comparison, World War I killed about 2 of Britain's population. The Norman conquest was proportionally more deadly to England than World War I. And it all started on that hill at Hastings, when Harold decided he couldn't wait 2 more days for reinforcements. So what's the legacy of the Battle of Hastings? The most obvious impact is linguistic. For 300 years after the conquest, England had 2 languages: French for the ruling class, English for everyone else. This is why English has 2 words for many things: cow, English, and beef, French bœuf, pig, English, and pork, French pork, sheep, English, and mutton, French mouton. The English peasants raised the animals. The Norman nobles ate them. The language reflects the power structure. French remained the language of the English court until 1362, nearly 300 years after Hastings. English kings spoke French. Legal proceedings were conducted in French. If you wanted to be anyone in England, you had to speak French. The entire English nobility was replaced. Every Anglo-Saxon earl was either killed, exiled, or reduced to poverty. Norman lords took their lands. By 1086, only 8 of land in England was still owned by English nobles. The other 92 had been given to Normans. But there's another legacy of Hastings that's less obvious but equally important. The Norman Conquest created the English legal system that still exists today. William brought Norman administrative practices to England. He commissioned the Domesday Book. He established a centralized bureaucracy. He created a system where the king's law applied to everyone, not just local custom. This is why common law developed in England and spread to America, Canada, Australia, and dozens of other countries. The modern legal systems of half the world can trace their roots back to William's post-Hastings administration. The Battle of Hastings also ended England's connection to Scandinavia and oriented it toward continental Europe. Before 1066, England was part of a North Sea world connected to Denmark, Norway, and the Baltic. After 1066, England became part of a cross-channel world connected to France. This would shape English history for the next 800 years. The 100 Years' War, the Wars of the Roses, even Brexit, all of these have roots in the political geography created by William's conquest. But let's come back to Harold for a moment. History has not been kind to Harold Godwinson. For centuries, he was remembered as a perjurer and a usurper who got what he deserved. This was Norman propaganda, repeated by Norman chroniclers and taught as fact. The truth is more complex. Harold was an experienced, capable king who had the support of the English people. He defeated a massive Viking invasion at Stamford Bridge just weeks before Hastings. He made one strategic mistake, refusing to wait for reinforcements, and it cost him everything. If Harold had waited 2 more days, he would have had 12,000 men instead of 7,000. With those numbers, the English shield wall would have been unbreakable. William would have been forced to retreat. England would have remained Anglo-Saxon. The entire history of England, and by extension much of world history, would be different. But Harold didn't wait. And so he died with an arrow in his face and a sword in his hand. His body mutilated, his kingdom conquered, his people subjugated. There's a reason the Battle of Hastings is one of the most famous battles in history. It's not just because of the arrow or the famous tapestry. It's because this battle genuinely changed everything. October 14th, 1066, is the date when Anglo-Saxon England died and Norman England was born. It's the date when the English language began its transformation into what we speak today. It's the date when England's political orientation shifted from Scandinavia to France. And it's the date when 7,000 men died in the mud on a hill in Sussex. This is Ash and Crown History, where we explore the moments that changed the world. Not the sanitized version, but the brutal truth. If you want to see more stories like this, the blood, the tactical details, the human cost of historical turning points, subscribe now and hit that notification bell. Next time, we're covering what happened after Hastings. How William crushed the English rebellions, the harrying of the North, and why one historian called the Norman Conquest the last successful invasion of England and the most brutal. Drop a comment and tell me, what other battles should we cover with this level of detail? Agincourt? Towton? Bosworth Field? Your comments shape what we explore next. The Battle of Hastings killed 7,000 men in one day. The Norman Conquest killed 200,000 people over 5 years. That's the story they don't teach you in school. That's the story we tell here. Thanks for watching. This is Ash and Crown History, where the past is never boring and the lessons are written in blood.